trenches. Let's make a righteous ruckus.
Hi, welcome to the Righteous Ruckus podcast. I'm your host once again, Riley Lowe. I got to think of some better adjectives. I always say like your gracious host or maybe your honorable host. I'm honored to be your host this week and every week. Although, like I mentioned before, maybe when this airs, I haven't decided on order yet, so maybe I've already had a guest on, right? I'm excited to kind of start incorporating some guests. Maybe I'll put the guest on before this one airs. But in any event, I've seen some material lately that's really kind of prompted, and just the reading, the daily Bible reading, and had some things happen with our girls. You know, our youngest, she just turned 5 recently, and so we've got 2 awesome girls. Got an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old now. They are so awesome. They love Jesus. They love church. They love all the biblical stuff. There was some deal. They were watching some video the other day, and it was like, can you guess the Bible story using only emojis? And it would have these different emojis. And man, they were just, they got almost all of them. They were struggling. There were some complicated ones, but they were just knocking them out. And I'm like, wow, this is impressive, right? This is impressive. They have so much more knowledge than I had when I was their age. And that's the way I want it to be. That's the way we've tried to foster it with them, because it's just, what a blessing. But I do have a confession to make regarding having children. I've got a confession to make. For the longest time in our marriage, we didn't. It took 10 years. It was 10 years. We'd been married 10 years before we had our first child, right? And you may be going, wow, that's a long time. Well, yeah, it was a long time. It really was. So the reason why is because we really struggled. We were both, I don't know what you want to call fairly young Christians. I had been a Christian just a short time before I got married. And we looked around in the world, right? And this was, almost 20 years ago. And so, you could see the decline of the world, of civilization. You could really see it trending downward, right? You could see the downward spiral of the culture. We didn't want that for our kids. This is what we did. We looked around and we saw the depravity in the culture, and we said, why would we want to bring a child into this kind of world, right? And there's probably a lot of you that are thinking that right now. You're like, yeah, that's why we don't want to have kids, is because why would you want to raise a kid in this kind of world, in this kind of culture? But like I said, it was 10 years, but eventually we came around to where, so just because we didn't have kids and were afraid for them to be influenced by the world did not mean that everybody else stopped having kids. They were having kids. And really, God worked on softening our hearts to the point that we came to the realization, basically, we put it into words one day. We were discussing it, and I said, everybody else is still having kids. There's still kids being born. The fact that we are not raising our children right now does not mean that kids aren't being born. So there's kids being brought into the world right now. Why wouldn't we try to raise some godly kids and throw those out there in the mix, right? Why? How come the darkness has to be so just continually taking over the world, and we can't throw some light out there, right? Think about if you're in a dark room, and this is just for instance here. If you're in a completely dark room, the lights, the electricity's out, right? Electricity goes out. It's nighttime. You're in a dark room, and you have a candle. and you light that candle, all of a sudden the room's not so dark. And you take that candle and you light another candle and another candle and another candle. It's not long before the whole room is lit up and you forget how dark it really is, right? And that's kind of where we ended up with, is going, look, why can't we, there's no guarantee that our children are going to be godly, but why can't we raise our kids to be more godly than we were when we were kids, and try to put some light out there in the world, right? Who knows what kind of influence our kids could have on the world? Who knows? So we decided to do that. Now, one thing we also do is we force them to go to church, force them to learn godly things. We don't ask them if they want to. We tell them to, right? We tell them to. And I can hear it now. We don't want to force our kids to go to church, or whatever the popular opinion of today is. You know, there's so much screwed up thought process in parenting these days. There's a whole train of thought right now that's becoming very prevalent, where people just say, look, I don't want to force my beliefs on my children. I want them to discover them on their own, to find their own path. Oh, you force them to clean your room. You force them to pick up their toys. You force them to do their chores. You force them to brush their teeth, to take a bath, to go to bed. You force them to do everything else in life, but you just want them to find Jesus on their own and not instruct them to. Is that that's what I'm hearing from the culture? That just doesn't jive. It doesn't jive. And so that's kind of where the culture is today. And, now I do think, people will also say, well, I don't want to force it on them and then turn them away from Jesus. There's a whole train of thought there. But trust me, kids are drawn. I watch these kids. These kids are not the only kids in the church that we attend that love Jesus. This church is full of kids that love Jesus because their parents are bringing them and training them up and having this good influence. They are naturally drawn to the goodness of the gospel and of Jesus Christ. They're naturally drawn there because they got the innocence of children. And you say, well, you're just forcing it on them. Well, yeah, I am. Let me raise my hand and say, yeah, I'm doing that. You know why? Everybody is vying for your children. Everybody is vying for your children. Not just you. Everybody is. I think there's a distinction, though, when I say we force them to go to church. What I mean is we force them to attend church. We force them to learn the godly things. And we also teach them things like, because as Christians, we are the church. We are the church. We can't actually go to church. We know it's just a saying, right? But however, there's a lot of people that compartmentalize the church to where it's, and the kids will see that. Well, mommy and daddy are acting one way when they're not in church, arguing and doing everything else and cussing and doing vile stuff. And then it's time to put on the act and go to church. And what that trains a kid is to put on an act and go to church. That's what it trains them. So you got to strive to do your best as a parent to not distinguish between church acts, church behaviors, and life outside of the church walls behaviors. And it's that's just what you got to do. By giving an example to your kids on what being in the church is like, and surrounding them with others that are the church, you can help protect them from the constant barrage of demonic attacks, quite frankly, that they're experiencing from the world. You can't neglect it. You cannot neglect it. And you can't just put your head in the sand and kind of hope for the best. I think there was a time when that was, I mean, I'm not going to say it was acceptable. It was culturally acceptable, and it was the norm, quite frankly, just to say, well, we're going to send our kids to vacation Bible school and in the summertime, and kind of hopefully they'll kind of gather around some good friends, and we're just going to turn them loose and hope for the best, right? That was the mentality. Unfortunately, that's still kind of the mentality sometimes. But, Proverbs 22:6 says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. And, Proverbs are just short little, short statements that contain moral or general truth, right? So it's not a promise saying that as long as I teach my kid about Jesus, then my kid will become a Christian and I'll see them in heaven. What it's teaching them is that they will know, when I train my kids about Jesus, they will know right and wrong. They will know the right thing to do versus the wrong thing to do. They will know that it's right to pursue a relationship with Jesus Christ. Do they still have the free choice to reject that? Yes. But the hope is that, and the kind of the general teaching there is that that will carry with them. You set that foundation, you set that expectation, you give them that knowledge, and that will help guide them, whether you realize it or not. That'll help guide them throughout their life, right? It will. And then Proverbs 1:7 says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. I tell you what, there's a lot of fools out there in the world today. And the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. The beginning of knowledge. And, it's not talking about being scared like a scared puppy dog, tucking its tail. It's talking about a reverential fear, that an awe, being in awe of God. That's the beginning of knowledge, because that leads you to want to explore who God is and what God is, and want to know more about God. Ultimately, you'll gain a closer relationship with God. You'll gain more knowledge about the Bible. It's just a great setup, and it's your duty and my duty as a Christian parent to train up your kids in the way that they should go. You can't rely on their teachers, on their coaches, to train them up, right? Now, unfortunately, we live in schools now, there's some great teachers. I know some great teachers. There's some awful teachers. The public school system in general. Now, granted, I live in Oklahoma. We are the reddest state in the union. We are the most conservative politically in the union. That being said, our education system is our state superintendent, Ryan Walters. He is battling the powers that be in the educational system. You wouldn't think that you would have to say, we're not going to allow pornography in our schools. But yet people are fighting and suing Ryan Walters because they say, no, we want it. We want little kids to have pornography. That's just where we are in society. So, if you're able to get your kids out of public school, get them into a vetted private Christian school if you can, or homeschool if you can. And even if you are in public school, show up at the school board meetings. That's something, our kids aren't in public school right now. We're able to, it's not easy, but we've made the decision to put our kids in a private Christian school, in a very affordable private Christian school. But it's also a Christian school that we vetted, and we trust the teachers, and we trust the administration of this school. We know the teachers. We know the administration of the school. We've got a relationship with them, and you just can't trust your kids to just anybody these days. You just can't, because there's there's such a battle going on for kids. It's a ridiculous battle that's going on for kids right now. It's a spiritual battle, and we have to be engaged in that battle. We just really do. But what I was going to say, though, is the public school that our children would attend, I need to become more active in battling the vileness there. I need to go to some school board meetings, right? I mean, my kids aren't in that school, but we're in that school district, and I need to explain to them why my kids aren't going to school there. I do need to explain that to them. Some of our tax money is going towards this school and providing for this school, but yet I can't allow my kids to go there because of X, Y, and Z. But, you can't, you need to be extremely picky on your school, your teachers, your coaches. Coaches is a big thing these days. I've got two girls, and one of them's kind of in dance. For the most part, they're not that interested in athletic activities to where you have to entrust them to a coach, right? And that would be a tough thing to do. That would be a very tough thing to do. And parents do it all the time. They entrust their children to a coach. You want to be sure that coach shares your same worldview, and that they're not counteracting or tearing down your worldview while they have your kids. You just got to watch out for it. But the enemy will do everything they can to get your kids to be influenced by people outside of your home and get those people to train up your kids in a worldview that opposes God and his people. It happens all the time. You watch some of these little clips from like Frank Turek or other apologists. They're on these college campuses and they're talking about these kids go off to college. These parents have their kids in school and their kids go off to college. Even if they leave for college and they're going to church, they're involved in church, they know the right thing, and then they go to college and they show up at Christmas break and they're an atheist because their worldview has been deconstructed by people that have clever arguments, not solid arguments, but clever sounding arguments, just enough to where it gets a child to go, or a kid or young adult to go, yeah, I'm just not so sure about this Christian thing anymore. And one of the lines that Frank Turek actually has, he says, so many of our kids are being talked out of Christianity. They're being talked out of it because they were never talked into it, right? They were never talked into it. And that's our job as parents. We're supposed to teach our children. We're supposed to teach our children about, I want my kids, now they already are. They're very young, but they're already more prepared for the world than I was when I went off to college, quite frankly. I was very superficial in the world, very superficial. But it is our job as parents to pass the baton of the gospel, of our Christian worldview. We're in a race, just like Paul says, right? I've finished the race, right? We're supposed to be able to pass the baton to the next generation, the baton of our Christian worldview, of the gospel, the baton of salvation in faith alone, by grace alone, in Christ alone. We're supposed to be able to pass that on to the next generation. And we do that enough times, and we can multiply the effect, and we can light some more candles, and we can help influence the world, and ultimately we can try to do, like, I guess is organically becoming my catchphrase, which was found first, I heard about it, was on a t-shirt that my wife bought. But we light enough candles in this world, we can continue to make heaven crowded.